All
Let's
right.
do it. Let's
So
do it.
we usually wait a little bit because we're doing some live reactions after the game. But since we came on a day later, because I wanted to kind of see how the injury was going to go with Tyrese and if they're going to give any updated information. So it's kind of good to go on the next day because now we kind of have a full, better detail of what's going on. But let's get to our Something Happened Today segment right away. What is going on with Tyrese Haliburton?
Damn.
So I told y'all, if you've been watching our show throughout the finals, after game 2, he was limping at the podium. And the next day, it kind of reported he was having some ankle soreness. To me, that was a lot of just coach talk, team talk, and they were kind of hiding what was the real issue. When I saw when he was practicing going into game 3, he had tape going up his calf. And normally, if you have an ankle injury, you do not have tape. So regardless if he had some ankle soreness, he might have. But I think the real issue is having some tightness, soreness in the calf. And obviously, this got aggravated in game 5. So let's kind of break down the play that it happened. He was trying to push off on his right, kind of stumbled and tripped in front of Chet. And you can immediately tell he was in pain. Kind of was laid on the floor for a little bit. Went back to the locker room with a wrap on his leg, which is more than likely heat, and came back in the game. But from that point on, was never the same. He didn't have any explosiveness to get by any defenders. And if you don't have any speed against this OKC team, Eric, what do they do?
They'll run you at the gym.
Yeah, they create havoc on defense. And
absolutely,
pretty much the whole second half, it was a couple dribbles right, a couple dribbles left, could not penetrate for the life of him. And then a couple passes here and there. He made no field goals, right? Had about 4 points just on free throws, but obviously did not look like himself. So I'll throw this to you, Eric, before we kind of break down the injury a little bit further. But what do you see in game 5 and just kind of how that looked?
I think when it was probably a few days ago, we were like knocking on all the wood around us, like imaginable, when we said the good thing about like the series, it seems to be a pretty healthy series. And it's just like, right. It's just like let's just let the best team win. And so now we still might get the better team that wins, but it does just create a sense of, man, like I don't even know if we're going to see a game 7 now. Cause Haliburton, he just does a lot for the team, and we've been talking about it all playoffs long. We don't have to go down the list. It's tough. Like when he's playing well, and not necessarily like a bunch of points, but when he's kind of filling that stat sheet, being the aggressor, kind of what you alluded to with when you are a step slower, OKC will swallow you up. And so, it's tough. I mean, they're at the point, like if they would have been up, let's say if they were up 3-1, they would have lost game 5. I would have been like, damn, but at the same time, it's like, hey, they can just somehow muster up one of these last two games and just have a magical moment maybe from someone else. But the fact that they got to get 2, it's going to be tough, and obviously a tough injury at the worst possible time.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I know we said previously, last show, like I don't think OKC would lose 2 in the series, and then now adding the injury, it just makes it that more harder for Indiana to kind of get by in the series. But let's break down what we know. Shams reported earlier today that he does indeed have a calf strain, and they are getting an MRI to determine the severity. More than likely, just based on some of the reporting, is that he probably has a grade 1. They want to double check on the MRI whether or not that is actually a grade 2. So when we think of like scales and when we look at the calf injuries, and when you have a strain, anywhere from 0 to 25% is a grade 1 strain. Anywhere from 25 to 50 to almost 75% is a grade 2, which a grade 2 would be a partial tear of the calf. A grade 1 is more like micro tearing. It's not full blown tear or anything like that. And then obviously a grade 3 would be a full tear of the calf muscle, which would obviously more than likely put him out of any possibility of him playing. So with that being said, if this was a regular season game or even first round of the playoffs, he's more than likely not playing game 6, right? He's more than likely going to be off for a week or two to recover if it was a grade 1 strain. If it was a grade 2 strain, you're looking at more 4 to 6 weeks. So we saw this earlier in the playoffs with Aaron Gordon, even though it was his hamstring. It was a hamstring strain, but they still function in the same way. Any type of muscle strain is difficult to play on, especially when you get into the grade 2, the partial tears, right? And we saw that with Aaron Gordon. He obviously tried to play for game 7, but just didn't look like himself, wasn't able to move like normal. And moving forward, we don't know what we would have seen if they would have won that game. So
yeah. So yeah, I was just gonna say, like, definitely it being the finals, it's gonna be interesting because maybe we're just about to get to it, but you obviously don't want to risk an injury where you're out a year or two, right? So it's kind of tough where it's like, this is big. It's going to be tough to get back to where we are now. But I mean, I don't even want to say it, but I know that a calf injury could potentially
we never want to say those words, but
have an effect on something else, right?
Obviously, I think in the back of everybody's mind is Kevin Durant, right?
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking of.
It happened in the finals. Wow. And he had a calf strain, which he suffered early in the playoffs in round 1, I believe. So he was already out about 4 weeks at that point, but he had a pretty severe calf strain. It was like a grade 2. And obviously we know what happens next. Played well in the first quarter and then tore his Achilles. So the breakdown of that goes this. So once you strain a muscle, the muscle becomes inflamed, irritated, and becomes immediately weak. So once you have inflammation, it's going to cause what we call like inhibition. So it's just muscle weakness. So that calf is not going to fire the same way it would normally do, right? So if your calf muscle is not as strong and is not able to withstand pressure, forces go down to your Achilles more, right? So it just puts your Achilles at more of a risk than it should be. Not saying that if he goes out right now, he's going to blow his Achilles. Nobody's saying that. But there is a risk if he has a more severe calf strain that could be a result, right? And we've seen earlier in the playoffs, right? We've seen Damian Lillard, who was taking time off for the DVT, came back. He had a previous Achilles tendonitis in the previous year. So he had a little bit of precursor to the Achilles and tore his Achilles. Tatum's was really out of nowhere. There's nothing that was kind of like that we knew about, that he had any previous injuries that we were made aware of. But that's just the result. So strain can leave the weakness, which can decrease that strength in the calf, which can put more forces on your Achilles tendon.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, great. Like, just kind of information. We know that the Achilles, we saw what happened with Kevin Durant, sorry, just such an innocent move that he made, which tore it. But then, as you mentioned, hey, there was also Jason Tatum, where we don't feel or we didn't hear about any pre-existing injuries, and it can kind of shows you it can happen at any time. I think with Hallie, he's just got to really listen to his body. We know that they are a better team with him in there, but if he's going to be at 50-60%, it might be a thought where, hey, we're going to be at home, we're going to have the crowd with us, we're going to just treat this like as a game 7. We saw some guys step up in game 5 towards the end there, and so maybe that's a thought, like, hey, like, let's just go swinging, and maybe somebody else will kind of fill the void for at least one game, right? And so I think it just depends on the severity. If it's borderline 2, and obviously we know 3 would be a no chance, but if it's borderline 1 to 2, I get it. It's these moments don't happen very often, but man, we know that there's the risk versus reward. You got to weigh that out, and I guess we'll find that out on Thursday.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to try to play and do everything he wants to play. Rick Carlisle is just going to have to be the judge of how he's moving around, because his game is predicated on speed and being able to move around on the court everywhere, penetrate, be able to kick and run the break. And if he doesn't really have that, he doesn't have the ISO game to create anything. And you saw that in game 5, right? He's not backing down somebody and making a fadeaway or anything like that. His game is predicated on speed, predicated on moving around, penetration, and obviously making the right pass. And you saw in game 5, he just wasn't able to be his normal self. So there comes a point in the game where if you see that early on, it might just be more beneficial to be like, hey, you gave your effort, you brought the energy for your team. Maybe they take a quick lead, that Willis Reed moment, and then you bring in like TJ McConnell to kind of bring that speed and aggression that he's been bringing and that he brought in game 5.
Yeah, I mean, I know that was a name we're probably going to talk about in this show, TJ McConnell. He was really been a good. He's been a good pacer, solid. Hasn't had as much of a role this season, or at least second half of the season and in the playoffs. Yeah. But obviously, he was a guy that was ready. And hey, we're going to talk a little bit about it, but maybe he could have played a little bit longer there. And so that's probably something that Rick Carlisle is going to think about. As you said, is it going to be that Willis Reed moment? I mean, I know we probably thought that with Aaron Gordon, and then, he ends up playing a lot of the game. Right. And so, different type players, different injury. And so, we'll see if I could see him trying to give it a go, as long as it's not super serious. And then at that 5-6 minute mark, I think Rick Carlisle will have a big decision to make, whether this is going to work or not for them.
Yeah, and the reality is he was able to move around okay on the court. Like, it wasn't like he was limping constantly.
Right.
He was just didn't look like himself. And you can tell by his game. You can see it in his demeanor. You can see it in his face, just the way he was. He looked like he was being cautious as much as possible. But it's also, does he cost his team on defense too, right? Because he's not able to move around like normally. So it becomes more of a liability on defense, and he's not doing as much on offense. So I think they just got to play by ear and see how he feels going into game 6. But maybe he just brings that. You're in the home crowd. You bring your crowd going. You get your team going, and then kind of give it off to the rest of the boys on the bench, and just expect your bench to step up for you.
Do you think I know if it's bad enough, it probably won't matter, but does the extra day, I mean, it can't hurt, obviously, but does that help a little bit? I mean, if it is like not a very serious injury, does the extra 24 hours, I mean, is it that much of a difference if they were to play tomorrow night versus Thursday, and it's like a concern, but not a huge concern?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. The extra day of rest, right? So he's going to get about 72 hours in between, right? So that, if you think about acute inflammation, it takes over in the first 72 hours. The lucky part for him compared to like regular us, right, is he's going to get treatment around the clock. Yeah. So that will speed up the process of healing as best it can. And we saw with Steph Curry in the second round, right, where he had a strain, and it just first time he's ever had a strain, and he didn't really know what to do with it. It was probably pretty significant. It probably wasn't as they kind of labeled it in the media. And even though he was given some extra time in the series, still wasn't able to get to that point. So I think this is obviously finals. This is more than likely going to play because he knows this could be the last game. So they're going to try to give him as much treatment around the clock as possible. And that will speed up some of the healing and probably more make him feel less pain and discomfort. That's probably what it will do. Right. However, that doesn't change the fact that the calf is probably weaker than it would be if he didn't strain it.
Yeah. I mean, like a good point. He's obviously getting the round the clock treatment, and it's going to probably feel better as you get into the game. But when you sprint a few times against the Thunder, that's when we'll see, how he's really feeling. So we'll look out for that early on Thursday for sure, if he plays.
That's for sure. All right. So we'll probably get a little update tomorrow, at least on the severity, if they even say it or not. But I think they have a good idea of where it's at.